They called it the Intergalactic Weapons Expo, but Sergeant Ronnie Kowalski would have preferred Cosmic Clown Convention. It took everything in him not to laugh, as a gelatinous creature in what resembled a sequined bathrobe demonstrated. A shimmering beam weapon that vibrated like an electric toothbrush on caffeine. Alien dignitaries clapped with frilled appendages, bulbous eyes blinking in polite approval. The smell of ozone and burnt citrus hung thick in the dome. Ronnie leaned against the display table marked Earth. Carelessly taped signage, a few half-empty ammo boxes, and a cooler full of Dr. Pepper beneath it. He sipped from a chipped thermos that read Vietnam 69, eyes hidden behind scratched aviators, boots planted like oak roots in dusty red lunar soil. The only thing shinier than the thermos was the rifle lying on the table. It was long, wood-stocked, and bore the kind of age that made aliens smirk in polite disbelief. "You sure this is where you want to be, Sarge?" said Private Jenkins, crouching beside a crate labeled Property of Texas. He was wiry, sarcastic, and currently chewing gum like it owed him money. "These people think we throw rocks at trees." "Let 'em think it," Ronnie muttered, flicking his thumb over the barrel of the M1 Garand. "It's funnier that way." The Earth booth was sparse, bare bones, a sore thumb in a field of glittering stalls manned by species with names unpronounceable to human tongues. Holograms danced, plasma buzzed, antimatter coils twisted with rainbow energy. And there sat Ronnie, with an 8-pound relic of a rifle that had liberated Europe 80 years before any of these aliens knew what a bullet was. A delegation approached, tall, thin figures with jointed limbs and crystalline eyes. Their leader wore a sash with moving text that translated itself mid-air. Zinthar Vel-Luke, senior weapons analyst of the Galactic Empire, floated forward on repulsor hooves that didn't touch the ground. "Terran," he said, with the cadence of someone trying not to gag, "we are curious to witness what relic you have brought to this event." Ronnie tipped his hat. "Be glad to show you, Zinthi." "It is Zinthar," the alien corrected, pronouncing it with a series of throat clicks. "Sure, Zinthi." Ronnie hoisted the Garand, holding it like a sacred relic. "This here's the M1 Garand, used in World War II. Fires 30-06 Springfield, 8-round clip, semi-auto, accurate up to 500 yards. And she goes ping when she's empty." Zinthar blinked slowly. "This stick shooter is your submission?" "She's not just a stick shooter," Jenkins cut in. "She's the original freedom dispenser." More laughter, this time from the growing crowd of alien officials, engineers, and military brass. The humans were a sideshow. They always were. But this was the first time they brought a weapon so obviously obsolete it practically creaked with history. "Primitive," someone muttered in Galactican, thinking the translators wouldn't catch it. They did. Ronnie smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd been underestimated all his life and relished every second of it. Without a word, he stepped forward to the firing line, motioned for the target drone to hover into place. It was a spherical combat dummy, shiny and sensor-rich, perfect for demos. He loaded the clip with the calm reverence of a priest preparing communion. The Garand clacked and pinged as it accepted the rounds. The sound echoed oddly in the pressurized dome. "You're gonna want to cover your ears," Ronnie said. Zinthar scoffed. "Please, we are not delicate organics like you." Ronnie didn't argue. He raised the rifle, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed like a thunderclap. Not a hiss, not a hum. A bang. Raw, violent, unapologetic. The recoil kicked back hard into Ronnie's shoulder, but he absorbed it like he'd done 1,000 times before. The first shot slammed into the drone's upper chassis, sending sparks and a whine of confused sensors into the air. The second tore off a stabilizer fin. The third, clean through its photoreceptor. By the 8th shot, the drone wobbled, flailed, and finally plummeted to the ground with a soft thunk. The ping of the empty clip rang like punctuation. Silence. A long one. Then Jenkins let out a slow whistle. "Still sings, don't she?" Zinthar looked like he'd swallowed a battery. The alien took a stiff step forward, his translucent skin flashing with subtle heat flares. Unimpressive. It relies on combustion, chemical discharge, kinetic trauma, barbaric. Effective, Ronnie said. Zinthar waved a shimmering hand, and a young Imperial tech stepped forward with what looked like a handheld obelisk wrapped in lights. He aimed it at the Garan's fallen target. A diagram appeared mid-air, showing structural damage. The tech stared, tilted his head. "Sir." The projectile punched through 3 layers of duranium composite. Zinthar blinked. "Impossible." "Duranium's tough," Ronnie said, shouldering the rifle. "But not tougher than physics. Newton says hello." "It is inefficient," Zinthar snapped, "and primitive." "And yet," Jenkins said, grinning, "your fancy drones, eating dirt." Zinthar's gaze narrowed. "Do you have anything else? Something less ancient?" Ronnie hesitated, then smiled. He crouched, opened the crate Jenkins had been sitting on. Slowly, reverently, he pulled out a longer weapon, wrapped in faded cloth. The barrel gleamed, black and mean. The bipod unfolded with a metallic click that turned every alien head within earshot. Zinthar frowned. "Another museum piece?" "Meet Big Mama," Ronnie said. "She ain't polite, she ain't subtle, she was built to stop tanks." "What is a tank?" Ronnie winked. "A problem that gets solved by this." But he didn't fire it. Not yet. Instead, he placed it gently on the display table, running a hand along the rail. He'd let them stew in it, let them think, let the fear simmer. It was part of the game. "Is it nuclear?" a curious Vordathi general asked. "Nope," Ronnie said. "She's just American." Laughter again, but this time thinner. Nervous. Several aliens stepped back, eyeing the weapon like it might leap off the table and bite them. Zinthar straightened, visibly flustered. "This expo is not a playground. We came here to witness evolution, not crude nostalgia." Ronnie leaned in close, his voice low. "You laugh now. But your fancy gadgets, your light shows, your anti-gravity trinkets, they're built in sterile labs by people who never had to fight for their lives. Big Mama. She was born on a battlefield, raised on smoke and blood. She doesn't care if your armor glows in the dark. She'll punch a hole through your dignity and keep going." The alien delegation stood motionless, unsure whether they were being threatened, educated, or both. Jenkins opened a soda. It hissed. He took a loud sip. "Also, she makes a real nice boom." A notification pinged across the expo. Earth's weapons demonstration had been uploaded to the Galactic net. View. Count rising by the second. Comments flooded in, mostly in alien languages, but the translators caught the tone. "Terran's insane. Boomstick magic." "I want one." Ronnie adjusted his sunglasses and turned back to Zinthar. "You said evolution, right? Well, sometimes evolution walks backwards with a gun." Zinthar, speechless, turned away and stormed off Tannen, a flurry of muttering. Jenkins finished his soda, crushed the can, and tossed it into a recycling bot that screeched in protest. "I think he's warming up to us." Ronnie didn't answer. He just stared at the screen where the M1 Garan's test had gone viral, now captioned, "Human shoots stick, destroys combat drone." He sighed, almost nostalgic. "They ain't. Ready?" "Nope," Jenkins agreed. "And they still haven't seen Big Mama roar." Ronnie gave the anti-tank rifle a loving pat. "Next round's on her." The Earth booth, once ignored, now drew a steady stream of curious aliens. Some pointed. Some took cautious notes. A few reached out to touch the woodstock of the Garand, as if hoping to absorb some part of its brutal, simple legacy. And in the shadows beyond the dome, deep in orbit, the Galactic Empire's military command was already drafting a report. Its title was short and grim. Reassessment of Terran Threat Classification. Immediate. The humans had brought a stick. Then they brought thunder. And they weren't done yet. The briefing room aboard the Galactic Command ship Velthra Prime was angular and sterile, a cathedral of polished steel and holographic silence. It hummed faintly, charged with tension no sound could soothe. Around the oblong table, the Empire's highest-ranking officers sat in solemn array: fleet admirals, weapons directors, planetary suppression strategists, all watching the replay of Ronnie Kowalski's weapons demonstration with grim disbelief. The footage ran again in slow motion. The M1 Garand barked, the drone stuttered and spun, and by the final shot, it was a wreck. Zinthar's expression of horror had become a meme across 3 quadrants. The humans hadn't just embarrassed the Empire, they'd insulted its pride, and, worse, its sense of technological supremacy. High Marshal Vorex Talca leaned forward, obsidian skin glowing faintly beneath his ceremonial armor. His voice, low and jagged like broken glass, sliced through the silence. "It is unacceptable. A pre-atomic projectile weapon disabled one of our Class 7 autonomous recon drones. That should not be physically possible." A scientist at the end of the table swallowed hard. "It's the kinetic energy, sir. The Terran projectile mass combined with muzzle velocity creates trauma that—" "We understand Newtonian physics," Vorex snapped. "We also understand embarrassment. Our enemies are watching. We project dominance across 1,000 systems. And now a backwater mud world has punctured that illusion with metallurgy and wooden stocks." A soft chime echoed. The doors opened. She entered with the grace of a serpent and the chill of deep space. Strategic Overseer Calix Varn, whose reputation preceded her like a thunderclap. Her eyes were cold, translucent plates with golden cores that tracked everything, even fear. She stood beside the projector and gestured. The footage paused mid-frame. "We were wrong," she said, her voice silk wrapped around a blade. "Not just in underestimating the weapon, but in misunderstanding the species." She waved again. The screen shifted to data. Battlefield footage, scattered human skirmishes on fringe planets, incomplete intelligence reports. Terrans are inefficient, clumsy, but they are aggressive problem solvers. Their species exhibits what they call brute force creativity. When precision fails, they escalate. They are apex predators from a death world who treat violence not as last resort, but an evolutionary constant. Vorex scowled. "We crushed dozens of primitive worlds with superior tactics. They pose no true military threat." Calix met his gaze. "And yet, they've survived every attempted annexation, sabotage, and proxy war. Not by matching us technologically, but by doing what we would never consider. They don't optimize. They adapt under fire. They embrace chaos." The table fell silent. Calix brought up another file. Images of past encounters. Human engineers reinforcing outdated tanks with scavenged reactor shielding. Infantry using comm towers as sniper nests. Civilians turning farming machinery into armored skirmish vehicles. Improvised brutality. Tactical unpredictability. "This isn't ignorance," she continued. "It's strategy disguised as desperation." A junior analyst finally found courage. "Why show us this now?" Calix didn't blink. "Because the Empire intends to escalate, and escalation favors them." Vorex's jaw clenched. "Are you suggesting we retreat?" "I'm suggesting we recalibrate. You do not attack a nest of hornets by smashing it with an ornate crystal." Outside the ship, the stars rolled past, silent, witnesses to rising tempests. Back on the Lunar Expo site, Ronnie Kowalski sat cross-legged on an ammo crate, the anti-tank rifle dismantled across his lap. His hands worked with slow precision. every bolt turn a meditation. The crowd had thinned after the shock wore off, but the ripples still traveled outward. Private Jenkins returned from the shuttle bay with a smug grin. "Sarge, you're famous. Alien kids are trying to build wooden rifles out of junk and shoot at fruit. The net calls you Gun Granddad." Ronnie didn't look up. "They can laugh all they want. Gun still works." Jenkins leaned on a crate. "Empire didn't laugh. Empire's pissed." "They should be." He clicked the bolt back into place, smooth as breath. "We made them. Feel fragile. You really think they'll come after us for that?" Ronnie finally looked up. "They won't just come. They'll overreact." And they did. 2 days later, a diplomatic message arrived. Not a warning, but an invitation. The Galactic Empire requested a joint training simulation with human forces to be broadcast across the Council networks. A friendly demonstration, they called it. Nothing more. Ronnie read the offer, eyes narrowing. "They want to humiliate us on camera." "Trap?" Jenkins asked. "Of course. But we're going." The simulation site was an abandoned asteroid, mining facility converted for live combat exercises, dozens of square kilometers, winding corridors, blast chambers, tight quarters, perfect for ambushes and desperate improvisation. The humans were told they could bring any equipment of their choosing. The Empire would mirror them with equivalent forces. Ronnie didn't believe a word of it. He assembled the team himself. There was Sergeant Mike Ortega, demolitions expert from Nevada, silent, built like a furnace, and reputed to have disarmed a nuke using a fork. Beside him stood Corporal Jonah Bates, Mississippi-born marksman with ice-water nerves and the patience of a coiled viper. Then came Lance Corporal Tyler Cho, Korean-American hacker who could rewire a shuttle mid-flight while blindfolded and cursing in 3 languages. They were lean, underfunded, and carried gear that looked stolen from a military museum. But Ronnie knew the truth. These were the kind of men who didn't ask for permission to win. Before launch, Ronnie addressed the team inside the transport bay, his voice low but steady. "They want to show the galaxy we're cavemen with toys. They're betting on flash and arrogance. What we've got is uglier, meaner. We don't give them elegance. We give them a scar." Tyler chuckled. "You practicing speeches now?" "Nope," Ronnie said, slamming a magazine into his sidearm. "I'm just reminding you what we are." They deployed under low gravity and dim light, boots crunching over fractured alloy. Within minutes, the simulation began. Empire squads moved in formation, glowing armor synchronized to central commands. Their tactics were flawless, their technology perfect, but their assumptions were fatal. Mike Ortega laid charges on a cooling vent. Jonah Bates set up an overwatch point inside, a shattered fuel chamber. Tyler hijacked a drone relay node and fed the Empire false readings, scattering their units like cattle spooked by thunder. When the first firefight erupted, it wasn't clean. It wasn't cinematic. It was raw, brutal, and fast. Shotgun blasts echoed in the dark. Explosives turned steel corridors into rust storms. Enemy commanders gave orders, but their troops were already gone, routed or bleeding. Calix Varn watched from a command deck far above, her expression unreadable as human. Soldiers made the Empire's elites scatter like insects. She studied the humans' body cams, noticing their irregular tactics, their refusal to hold lines, their use of the environment as weapon. They broke rules because they didn't have rules, only objectives. By the simulation's end, 3 human operatives were wounded, none dead. The Empire's squad was wiped out, not terminated, humiliated. Their officers left sprawled, disarmed, staring up at human troops who didn't bother mocking them. They just walked away. The broadcast ended with one image. Ronnie Kowalski walking alone through the artificial dusk, slinging the Garand over his shoulder like it had always belonged there. That night, alien forums erupted. Terrans cheat, said some. No, they survive, replied others. On board the Velthra Prime. Vorex crushed a datapad in his hand. We underestimated them, he admitted, voice bitter. Calyx turned away from the screen. No, we misunderstood them. You still don't grasp what you're dealing with. This isn't a military challenge. It's psychological warfare conducted by people whose ancestors killed with rocks and never looked back. She paused, almost amused. Do you know what that rifle ping meant, Marshal? He didn't answer. It meant they were out of bullets. And instead of fear, it became a battle cry. In a quiet, nondescript corner of the human base, Ronnie lit a cigar with a scratched Zippo. The flame danced in the reflection of Big Mama's barrel, now gleaming with fresh oil and the promise of more. Next move's theirs, he murmured. And deep in the galactic core, the Empire met in secret, no longer laughing. They began drafting war plans. But even then, somewhere in the back of their minds, a sound echoed. A faint ping now, synonymous with dread. The silence after the broadcast didn't feel like peace. It felt like the moment after a lightning strike. Charged, expectant, and far from over. Ronnie Kowalski didn't trust it for a second. The Empire had been embarrassed publicly. That kind of defeat didn't vanish with diplomatic spin or clever PR. It fermented in the dark corners of pride, brewed into something cold and calculated. And Ronnie had seen enough empires to know what came next. The morning briefing confirmed his suspicions. Earth's Security Council intercepted encrypted Empire communications. Fleet redeployments, resource requisitions, fast-tracked weapon approvals. All of it pointed to one thing. A new project. Something big. Something specifically designed to crush the symbolic thorn that was now human military unpredictability. Ronnie didn't even need to read the footnotes. They were building a countermeasure, probably several. Jenkins read over his shoulder, muttering, "They're not just planning another demo. They're planning to prove we're a one-hit wonder." Ronnie exhaled slowly through his nose. "They want to erase the memory of that win, make it look like a fluke. We won't let them." The Empire's new event came wrapped in diplomatic fluff and pseudo-cultural nonsense. A Peace Front Games, meant to showcase interspecies combat styles. Half tournament, half parade, fully rigged. The Empire controlled the location, the rules, the timing, and the narrative. Humanity was granted a single participant. No teams, no gear selection, no audience contact. The message was clear. We'll let you perform, but on our terms. Ronnie didn't argue. He didn't even hesitate. He nominated himself. The choice rattled Earth's delegation. Political advisors scrambled to nominate more photogenic candidates, war heroes with media training, or fluent galactic dialects. Ronnie declined all suggestions with a simple, stubborn refrain. They picked a fight with the man holding the old rifle. Let's give them a closer look. Preparations began in a sealed warehouse under Earth's lunar outpost. Ronnie trained alone. Not because he was antisocial, though he was, but because this kind of battle demanded solitude. Not just physical conditioning, but something deeper. He studied recordings of alien combatants, tactical schematics, terrain simulations. His rifle was tuned with monk-like care. He practiced with the M1 Garand until it whispered when it fired, until each clip ejection sounded like punctuation. He didn't train to win. He trained to remind. Behind closed doors, Earth's tacticians debated every angle. What if the Empire used enhanced gravity? What if they introduced psychic fields or time manipulation traps? What if they just rigged the entire match and vaporized Ronnie for laughs? No matter the outcome, humanity wouldn't bow. But they needed a performance that stuck, that rooted itself in the galactic psyche like a splinter no antiseptic could reach. Jenkins, ever the skeptic, cornered Ronnie during a maintenance check. "You know they're not just gonna throw soldiers at you, right? They're going to bring something special. Something with extra claws. I hope they do, Ronnie said, chambering around. Makes the lessons stick better. The games were hosted on the converted moon of Zeltron, a fractured rock re-engineered into a floating arena. Cameras floated in silent, unseen orbits. Spectator ships hovered miles above, broadcasting the event across the galactic net. It was spectacle, theater, and execution rolled into one. Ronnie stood alone in a holding cell carved into asteroid glass, arms folded, chewing on a toothpick. Like he had all the time in the world. The M1 Garand rested on the rack beside him, its polished woodstock a jarring anachronism in the glowing sterility of alien tech. He didn't dress for intimidation. Just standard fatigues, elbow pads, a helmet painted with the faded American flag. The only modification was the thick metal case he brought in with him, the one he didn't open. Not yet. A chime sounded, a hologram flared into existence. A robed alien with too many joints bowed ceremoniously. Human representative, you have been selected for the featured match against our latest combat prototype. This is an honor. We hope you appreciate the gesture. Ronnie smiled politely. Y'all built me a gift? That's sweet. What's it called? The overcompensator? The alien blinked slowly. Designation is S-37. Adaptive biomechanoid with neuroreactive plating and built-in particle suppression. It is designed to impress. Fancy? Does it bleed? We do not anticipate that. Well, Ronnie said, standing and slinging his rifle. Let's find out. The arena floor was a jagged canyon of synthetic stone, riddled with cover, points, and collapsed structures. It simulated battlefield chaos, though Ronnie could see the design cues, a funnel, forcing movement, herding the combatants toward spectacle zones. The machine waited on the far ridge, tall and jagged, a walking cathedral of death. It had no eyes, only sensors and plated jaws that clicked softly as it scanned. A countdown began. Ronnie didn't run. He crouched. He listened. He remembered. The moment the match started, the mech charged. It moved like a beast, but thought like a tactician, changing angles, using cover, tracking muzzle velocity. Ronnie dodged twice, ducked behind a slab of artificial marble, and fired. The bullet pinged off armor. No penetration. The second shot struck a joint, shattered part of the shoulder assembly. The thing screamed electronically and counter-fired with a suppressive energy blast that scorched Ronnie's cover to slag. He rolled, ducked, fired again. Every shot precise. Every movement earned. S-37 adapted. With each encounter it changed tactics, predictive targeting, pulse shields, concussive waves. Ronnie switched from brute force to misdirection. He threw metal shards to trigger sensors, used the rifle's ping to bait false aggression. The machine learned fast, but Ronnie learned faster. He took a hit to the ribs, hard enough to crack something, but grinned through bloodied teeth. Takes more than a tin can with daddy issues. Then he opened the metal case. Inside was a rifle twice the length of the Garand. Old, rusted in places. It looked like it belonged in a museum next to mammoth bones. But it was real. And it was. Loaded. The PTRD-41 anti-tank rifle. Russian-made. World War II vintage. Weighed more than some motorcycles. Fired a 14.5 mm round that laughed at armor. S-37 didn't laugh. It charged. Ronnie dropped to a knee, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The shot was a thunderclap. S-37's left leg vanished below the knee. Metal shrieked as it toppled, momentum tearing its own plating. It tried to rise. Ronnie walked forward, unfazed by sparks and screeches. He chambered another round, calm as loading groceries. The machine rose on one leg, aiming its last weapon. Ronnie pulled the trigger again. S-37's head disintegrated. Silence swallowed the arena. Up in the orbiting ships, gasps spread. Commentators stammered. Some systems cut the feed, but millions had already seen it. The old man, the forgotten weapon, the monster reduced to rubble. The Garand hadn't been enough for this one, so humanity brought something worse. Ronnie stood over the wreck, exhaled, and looked directly into the camera drone. Your move. Back on Earth, the footage spread like wildfire. Children reenacted the match with plastic toys. Analysts argued if the whole event had been rigged. Alien pundits questioned the wisdom of provoking a species that treated war like a do-it-yourself home project. The clip of the anti-tank rifle firing became the most downloaded file in galactic history within 4 hours. The Empire convened in crisis mode. Calix Varn stood before her superiors, unflinching. You built a superweapon to outmatch their past. They brought an older one and used it better. Vorex growled. He used a relic. No, she corrected. He used a statement. Across the galaxy, a new fear took root. Not of humanity's technology, but of their imagination. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for the last time. Ronnie Kowalski stood on the edge of the precipice, staring out into the vastness of space, the cold void that separated him from the rest of existence. His mission was clear, though it had changed shape. What began as a simple defense of pride had evolved into something much greater. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. And it wasn't going to be pretty. Calix Varn had always been ruthless in her strategy, a cold, calculating officer of the Galactic Empire who'd led countless campaigns to wipe out lesser species. The Empire's hubris was vast, and it was evident in their underestimation of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. They saw Earth as a planet of primitive creatures, incapable of mastering advanced technologies without aid from their betters. They hadn't anticipated that the very thing that made humans stand out, their irrepressible spirit, wasn't something that could be quantified by an algorithm or suppressed by any weapon. Since Ronnie's victory, the Empire had pulled back, but only temporarily. They had watched, analyzed, and learned from their mistakes. But they had one fatal flaw: their pride. They couldn't leave it alone. They couldn't let a small species, especially one that hadn't even mastered space travel until recently, humiliate them so publicly without consequences. Now humanity was on the verge of being dragged into another war, a war that, unlike the last, would leave no room for diplomatic niceties or any semblance of mercy. The Empire had declared a full-scale offensive. They weren't going to take any chances this time, but Ronnie didn't see it as a fight they couldn't win. He saw it as the opportunity for the final lesson. The next few days were a blur. Ronnie spent every waking hour preparing, making sure every piece of his equipment was pristine, every tactic analyzed. His comrades, the ones who had seen his victory and stood by him, had started to see him differently. He wasn't just an agent of vengeance or a symbol anymore. He had become a reminder of what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. Some of them thought it was madness to go on, to keep provoking the Empire. But Ronnie knew it wasn't just about the battle. It was about the long game. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity had the teeth to take on anyone. The broadcast that followed his victory was seen across the known universe, but it wasn't just a statement of what Earth could do. It was a message to all of them. His victory had been tactical, but it was the first time that Earth's might had truly been put on display. The Empire had miscalculated their threat level, assuming that the firepower of their newest creation, S-37, would be enough to silence humanity once and for all. What they hadn't counted on was the fact that Earth had a long history of being underestimated. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it wasn't going to happen the way the Empire thought it would. Ronnie wasn't playing by their rules anymore. The weapon they feared most, the PTRD-41, had already shown its might, but it was just one piece in a much larger puzzle. Humanity's ingenuity didn't stop at the pull of a trigger. It extended into every corner of technology, from communications to strategy, from brute force to psychological warfare. The Empire was still thinking in terms of machines and firepower, but Earth had learned to fight with far more than just weaponry. A new challenge emerged when a classified transmission arrived from the Empire's high command. They were preparing something even more insidious than before, an assault that would not only overwhelm Earth's defenses, but also send a message that could never be undone. The Empire had devised a weapon that was not only technologically superior, but emotionally destructive. It was a new breed of warfare, one designed not to crush human bodies, but human will. Ronnie knew the Empire would bring this weapon soon. He didn't know how or when, but he knew it was coming. He prepared for the worst, but kept his mind clear. The real battle was not about defeating their enemies. It was about keeping humanity's heart intact. Days later, the Empire launched its first wave. They came in with overwhelming numbers, bombarding Earth's outer defenses with a fury that sent shockwaves through the planet. But humanity's response was swift. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about showing the galaxy the true nature of Earth's resistance. Ronnie's team was already in position. Each move they made was deliberate, strategic, and precise. They took no prisoners. They weren't interested in diplomatic solutions anymore. The war had evolved into something personal. It was about survival, and showing the Empire they could no longer dictate the terms of engagement. Calix Varn, the mastermind behind the Empire's retaliation, watched from her command center, surrounded by a legion of officers who had never once doubted her. She believed that this would be the moment when humanity finally learned its place. Earth, she thought, would break under the weight of her Empire's might. But there was something in her eyes, something unspoken, something that gnawed at her confidence. She couldn't deny the weight of her own doubt. Ronnie's presence loomed over her every decision now. The Earth forces had taken losses, sure, but they fought with an intensity that no one had ever expected. What made it worse for the Empire was that their forces weren't just battling soldiers. They were battling a mindset. The more they attacked, the more they fed into it. And the more Earth fought back, the more unstoppable their resolve became. As the war waged on, Earth's tactics became even more unorthodox. They began using guerrilla strategies with devastating efficiency. It wasn't just about weapons anymore. It was about timing, psychological manipulation, and creating the kind of chaos that would haunt their enemies. The Empire, with all its advanced technology, couldn't predict the unpredictability of human nature. What it couldn't understand was the willingness of humanity to adapt, to never back down, no matter how difficult the odds. The stakes weren't just survival anymore. It was a war of philosophies, of ideologies. The Empire saw themselves as superior, but they didn't understand humanity's true strength: adaptability, resilience, and an unwillingness to bend. Ronnie's role in the war, though crucial, was shifting. He wasn't just a soldier now. He had become a symbol of the kind of force humanity could wield. As the battles escalated, Ronnie's presence became the catalyst for change. The Empire's tactics shifted, attempting to focus entirely on him. Every effort they made to eliminate him only galvanized Earth's determination. The more they hunted him, the stronger Earth's unity grew. Ronnie had become the center of the fight, but he was only a part of the bigger picture. As the war reached its climax, the final confrontation loomed. The Empire had one last weapon left, a final gambit to prove their superiority once and for all. But Ronnie knew that this time, the Empire's failure would be more complete than ever before. The final battle wasn't going to be won with guns or bombs. It was going to be won with the thing that made humanity different. The one thing the Empire couldn't anticipate, a refusal to lose, and that would be their downfall. The clash continued, fiercer than ever, but Ronnie Kowalski stood, at the center of it, unyielding. And with him, humanity stood too. The lessons had been learned. The galaxy would remember.